Hello, and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. Um, the obvious thing to talk about now is what is happening in Iran. I think there's not a lot, frankly, that needs to be said. Most of it is pretty obvious. I think we should all, voice our support for the protesters who are out there and calling for real change in the government. I think uh, the the particular call from, for example, the United Nations, where the human rights chief Volker Turk um, said in the statement that the UN is horrified by the mounting violence directed by security forces. The killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labeling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable. Um, you know, Urging peaceful means to resolve the issues. I think that all kind of, I mean, it needs to be said, but in another sense, it goes without saying. Um, I think it is important to recognize, especially I think for people on the left who often relate to Iran through the question of Palestine. Um, and see Iran as a counterweight to a lot of the pro-US forces in the region, which in some ways it has been. And as a supporter of the Palestinian struggle, which it certainly in its own way has been, though I have argued for years that I found that support to be less thoughtful and more self-serving than I think many people think it is. But it's certainly, it's certainly real, and it's certainly a lot more than most of the Arab states have done to help Palestine. But we have to also look at this. This is not a popular regime in Iran, and it has not been um, pretty much from the beginning. But and that lack of popularity has only gotten worse and worse over the years. We've seen repeated protests, repeated attempts to change this government. This government is authoritarian and theocratic. Uh, it has a it has a strong tendency to resort to violence. I think we saw really, I think in this particular round of protests, we've seen that. We've seen at the beginning they try to respond, letting the moderate president Pezeshkian to sort of initiate dialogue and try to that went by the boards very very quickly. And the violence from the regime has escalated quickly, which in turn has also led the violence of some of the protesters to escalate as well, which naturally gives the regime more excuse for even greater violence. And from the latest reports, it seems that the death toll is over 2,000, and that over 100 security forces have also been killed. So there's a good deal of violence. There's none of all of this is hard to confirm because Iran has shut off the internet. They've cut it off. They've cut off a lot of the phone service. Some news is still getting out, but a lot of it is restricted. So we can't be 100% sure about anything that's happening. Could be that things are even worse than it seems. But I think we need to acknowledge this is not a popular regime. It really never has been. Um, the revolution of 1979 that ended up bringing the Islamic Republic to power was not necessarily engineered by the people who ended up ended up in government. But I don't want to get bogged down in the history of that, although we will deal with some history in just a moment. uh, what I think is important for us as Americans to recognize is that there's really very little that we can do that's constructive. And what our government is right now doing is not constructive at all. Uh, Donald Trump's decision to impose a 25% additional tariff, that toy that he loves so much, on any country that is trading with Iran. The obvious attempt being, the obvious point being to further undermine the Iranian economy is not going to help the protesters. That is something that is a long range strategy, and the Iranian economy is already devastated. That's what started all of this. This started as a protest at the government's inability to do anything about the spiraling economic situation. And the truth is, the government doesn't have an answer. They don't have a strategy to do this. I'm not sure what they can do. Um, and it is, we can talk about the sanctions, and certainly the sanctions are important. They have been cruel. They mostly, they've always been directed at, intentionally or otherwise, and I would say intentionally, but whatever you think about it, they impact the people, not the government. That's how sanctions work. And as much as we can talk about those, they are not the root cause of the economic problems. The economic problems have been caused by crony capitalism, corruption, and mismanagement for years and years and years. Short-sighted decisions. You don't have to look far to see people from Iran talking about the terrible decisions this regime has made economically that have created this situation. But the protests quickly escalated from that to a full-blown call on this government to end. But Donald Trump is proposing not just the sanctions, but also some sort of military action. I mean, the idea behind any of that is that this would topple the government. Just toppling this government is not going to be helpful. We should have learned that lesson from Libya. Um, Toppling the government is going to lead to a power vacuum. There is no clear successor in Iran right now. There are factions, many of them, that could, see an opportunity to possibly take power, if not in the whole country, at least in parts of it. Um, and there is no unifying movement in Iran. There's no unifying organization. There's no unifying political party that can just step in. This idea that and apparently there was just a report I saw literally a few minutes before starting this video that the United States had actually met with the Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the former Shah of Iran, who we installed in 1953 and was deposed in 1979 by the revolution. If they believe that they can install him, he's trying to make the case that he can be a sort of a transitional leader. Look, this is a monarchist. This is not somebody who is stepping in order to give power away, first of all. Second of all, in any case, it's a fantasy. Pahlavi has no measurable support, popular support in Iran, and no organizational support whatsoever inside the country. What little organizational support he has is outside of Iran. So, and so if people are looking to, for example, 1953, when Mohammad Mossadegh was elected prime minister, and the United States did not like that. He was a socialist. This was, of course, at the height, the height in the early days of the Cold War. And the U.S. engineered a coup that unseated him and reinstalled the Shah. That was done with the help of the Iranian military. So we were working with the Iranian military to do that. We don't have anything like that. We have no allies within the Iranian system that are capable of organizing some kind of coup like that. There's nothing like that today. Nothing remotely comparable. So this idea that Pahlavi can be just installed is ridiculous. It's as ludicrous as Ahmed Chalabi was when we invaded Iraq. That is not going to happen. And so again, we come back to the fact that toppling the Iranian government is going to leave a power vacuum. Now, if that's what the people of Iran do, that is up to the people of Iran, and the people of Iran can then call on the international community, and I'm sure it won't be the United States that they look to, but they can call for help in whatever direction that they then need. But that is up to them. Right now, the agenda of the Trump administration is to topple the Islamic Republic. And while again, I have no sympathy for this government in Tehran, just toppling them is not only is it not going to make the situation worse, it threatens to repeat the the power vacuum that we saw in Libya, and then you're talking about the country possibly sort of internally dividing by areas where different small groups are able to take some small degree of local degree of power, and that then starts to look a lot like Syria. None of this is what anybody with any modicum of decency would want for the people of Iran. And certainly it contradicts the nonsensical and absolutely disingenuous statements that are being made by right-wing American pro-Israel and similar sorts of forces. There's so many of these bad faith arguments out there, and you can see them all over the place. It can go as uh, directly as, for example, criticizing college students. I've seen this many times. Oh, where are all the students protesting the Iranian government? Well, they don't need to protest the Iranian government. There's no point to them protesting the Iranian government. Their protest won't mean anything. They won't do anything. They have no chance of affecting the Iranian government's policies. Okay, that's why they are American students. That's why they were protesting. Those groups were not out there saying, when they were protesting the genocide in Gaza, they were not out there saying genocide is bad, stop it doing it in Gaza. They were saying U.S. stop supporting it. They were telling their universities to divest from the genocide. They were calling for something specific that they had some power to affect. So these ridiculous arguments that have come from pro-Israel leaders, from just racists like the writer J.K. Rowling, who is transphobic, anti-Semitic, and racist. She has a nice trifecta going for her there. People who read her work should be aware of that. Um, that that it is exactly that. It is a bad faith argument. People who are urging Trump to strike Iran, again, are being as irresponsible as those people who urged the invasion of Iraq more than 2 decades ago. They are ignorant of the situation, or they simply want to see Iran devolve into something like Libya or Syria. But these are, in any case, bad faith arguments. And it's sort of ironic because they're rooted in the belief that that the Islamic Republic disappearing would mean that much like what Benjamin Netanyahu said a day or two ago, that if the Iranian regime falls, Iran and Israel would be partners again. No, it won't. Let's be really clear. No, it will not. Um, the people of Iran do support Palestine. What they haven't supported, and where things would change in terms of this calculus, and it's not good for the Palestinians, is that the people of Iran have not been, much like most of the people in Lebanon as well, have not been thrilled about the fact that so much of their country's resources go to supporting the Palestinians. Not that they don't want to support the Palestinians, but that we need it here. If we were in a better condition, that they say, many people say, if we were in better shape and we could afford to help, well, that would be one thing. But we need resources here, and people see their economic condition, just spiraling out of control, prices going crazy. Literally, people cannot afford to feed themselves and pay for their housing. When they're seeing that, and then they're seeing their government spending a lot of money and resources, not only on arming various groups, not just in Palestine, but across the region, as well as having to beef up their own military because of all that they're involved in, they question those priorities. That is the reality. And it is a problem, and it will be a problem for the Palestinians if the Islamic Republic falls, because a popular regime will not expend the kind of resources on Palestine that this one has. That is true. That being said, a popular regime will also still support Palestine. They will certainly not become, Israel's new partner, as the Shah of Iran was before the revolution. That was not a popular position in Iran at the time either, incidentally. In dictatorships, you can take unpopular positions. You can, you can just look at Egypt and ask Al-Sisi about that, um, and several other Arab countries. But a popular, or if we are encouraging a democratic future for Iran, democratic future is not going to lead to a partnership with Israel. Um, so all of that is just a whole lot of nonsense. And frankly, what's happening now is we have to see how there can be an international response that does support the protesters. This stage of the game, there really isn't one. There isn't much we can do. The things that are being proposed will only hurt them. Bombing Iran is not going to help the protesters. Okay, first of all, it's going to get some of them killed, even if you target Iran's military. Um, it's going to get some of them killed. It's only going to raise the stakes within the country. It is not going to move towards the sort of coup that you saw again in 1953. As I noted, that was, the U.S. working with the Iranian military. The Iranian military right now has taken a pretty unprecedented step, and actually, come out in support of the government and is acting to defend the government. So that's not going to help. What is going to be necessary is, when the Iranian people are ready, is for the international community to stand ready to come in with mediation efforts, support efforts, reconstruction efforts, democratization efforts, none of which can be led by the United States, none of which, frankly, should probably even involve the United States, but it may well be that we can't keep them out. But which has to be led by the United Nations, which is tough these days since the United Nations has been so sidelined. But this is exactly why we need an international community. I cannot stress it enough. I know I've said it. The things that Donald Trump is talking about doing, the directions that this administration has gone, are terrible, terrible ideas. In the best case scenario, they help the Islamic Republic survive. In the worst case scenario, they will turn Iran into Libya or Syria. So the best thing that American activists can do right now is to tell Donald Trump to back the hell off of Iran, and allow the Iranian people to lead. No one in Iran that I've heard of has asked the United States to bomb, has asked the United States to impose tariffs, has asked the United States to get involved in any way. So let's listen to the Iranian people as they are trying to free themselves from what is indeed a very repressive theocratic regime. So if you found this useful, please share, like, subscribe. You'll see the instructions on how to do that on your screen, and I will be talking to you soon.